Today we're going to start off with the base replacement products. Chris Martin will come up here, take about 10 or 15 minutes of our time to discuss the new Hexabase, which is new for 2020, as well as the Ultra Drive Grid. These are base replacement or base reduction products. And the idea here is still have the integrity and the performance, the long-term performance of a project, while reducing the amount of labor, excavation, and time associated with installations. So I'm going to get right into it and allow Chris to come up here. Again, if there's any questions at any time, raise your hand, blurt it out, ask the question, because then we can kind of tailor this to some of the situations that you've experienced on job sites and try to change that around and not make it negative experiences, but turn those into positive ones. Chris Martin.
Thank you, Joel. So as Joel mentioned, we're going to get into a couple of our new products for this year. We really came out with some cool concepts for the base replacement, how to put structure and how to put a solid foundation underneath our paver projects, our driveways, our patios, you name it, how to do that as quickly and efficiently as possible. The two main products that we hit on this year. So one is going to be intended for your patios, your walkways, your pavers, your non-vehicular type installs. And then the other one is going to be your driveways. It's going to be your paths, that kind of thing. Same concept, different approaches to doing it. The first one we're going to talk about is the Hexabase. This is a solid rigid panel, or I should say a rigid panel of high density polyethylene that takes the structural place of 6 to 8 inches of a compacted aggregate base. So when we typically do our paver installs, backyard patios, walkways, those kind of areas, because we live in a cold climate, we need to put that base there and make sure everything stays solid, stays put for years to come. This product has the structural integrity to replace that full 6-inch base. Some installers run 6, 8. We're in a very cold climate. This gets the job done. We use 100% virgin HDPE as opposed to the post-consumer recycled products in order to get that strength as high as we can. All about integrity. It's all about rigidity with this product. We also use a positive interlocking male and female connectors that once installed, this will not move. It can't shift. It can't slide. It is a locked-in structure that really does hold fast once it's in there. It's not resistant to any kind of moving like that. With that, it's also going to be extremely resistant to heaving in freeze-thaw conditions because it's going to make the whole thing have to move, and then it's got the structural rigidity to stop that. So the other great use with the Hexabase is that this truly is a multi-use product. This is a paver foundation, as we discussed. This can also be used for your grass gravel pavers if you're doing like a permeable overflow parking area. This is the product for that. You can also do fire access lanes, the emergency apparatus lanes, things of that nature, because it has the same structural properties in any of those situations. So taking a look at the system, I do apologize, the graphics a little dark, but we'll work with that.
And just so you know, each of you have one of these sheets right in front of you talking about the Hexabase. You can kind of follow along on that as well in the different sections of the installation.
Absolutely. So the whole concept with the Hexabase system is we want to address certain things but not overhaul the whole way that we're doing this project. We don't want to have to use special pavers, special spikes, special things that are outside the norm of what you guys are already doing. We want to stick with conventional, proven methods, conventional edging, conventional spikes, and we want to address only the things that we're working on here, the base thickness, the time involved, the labor savings. So we're going to use a separation fabric underneath this. You're going to compact your native soil as best as you can, and we're just going to put inexpensive, lightweight, either a non-woven, a spun bond, just a separation fabric so we don't have migration of materials back and forth, whether it's compacted base layer in the cells, the native soil, we're stopping that. Next component in the system is going to be the Hexabase panels themselves. These lay out super easy. They interlock together. They don't need special tools. You don't need to do special things. You simply lay them all out. Whatever you have excess, you can cut with circular saw, Sawzall. Super easy, super workable. Then you're going to use a very thin layer of a compactable fill material. Popular ones would be your 3/4 inch minus. Any material that's going to compact in there, an aggregate base. This is going to help give us that structure, and it's also going to help as an anchoring system for the spikes themselves. And then we go up to the conventional bedding sand, as you guys are all used to, your 1-inch bedding sand. Put your pavers on so they can settle in. We are going to have the same permeability, the same water migration rate. We don't have to worry about the water underneath the pavers, held moisture, blushing, sealer issues. That all goes away with the system. And then you go with your conventional edging, 10-inch spikes, all the same stuff you guys are already using. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, we're trying to make the wheels better. Key benefits of Hexabase. This is where it really starts to show. So with the Hexabase panels, you use 75% less aggregate-based fill material. We're only having to fill the 1.9-inch thickness of the panel with aggregate, as opposed to that 6 to 8 inches compacted down in your 2-inch lifts. You can already start to see the time savings here. Instead of building up that whole layer, we're putting that down, filling it once, compacting it once. Your foundation's there. It's solid. It's very, very quick. One of the biggest benefits of the Hexabase is that you don't need your full 4 to 6 guy crew to do this. This can easily be done, 2 to 3 person crew. You can use the Bobcats, the heavy equipment, but because you're digging a much shallower hole, it's not completely necessary. With bringing in less heavy equipment, that means less damage to the grass, the surrounding landscape, to the backyards. Much easier to work with, very highly resistant to heaving or settling in freeze-thaw conditions. Because we're locking that structure together, it's going to stay locked. You're going to save time, you're going to save money, and you will still have the same quality and peace of mind that you would have with your typical 6 to 8 inch base. Anyone have any quick questions on the Hexabase? We'll move into the drive grid. You know, we kind of gave a crash course. It was kind of quick.
Go ahead.
Yep. Right in back there. What you got?
I guess I'm kind of run up on the excavation part, so are you more focusing on getting your excavated area as perfect as possible because you have to be perfect with those mats?
That is a fantastic question. So we are going to put a little bit more care and precision into prepping that native soil. We do want to get that area as flat as we can. Typically, you can just take a rake or a lute, you can get it flat that way. And we're also going to be compacting the native soil, and so any irregularities are largely going to be taken out during the compacting and kind of raking everything smooth. We do want it as flat as we can get it. We don't have to screed it perfect. We want it as flat as we can get it, just so we don't have uneven support under the panels. We want it to sit nice and flat.
But ultimately, any pitch that you may have away from a structure, that would happen. Your excavation would happen with that native soil and the compaction of that native soil. So that is where a lot of your work would end up going as far as the preparation of that area.
And it kind of half got answered when you said less heavy equipment. I was just thinking more along the lines of like when clearing up the area, like track marks and whatnot, just irregularities with it.
A lot of those can be easily addressed with just simply raking it out, and then when we do the compaction step, most of that is going to take care of itself without a whole bunch of unneeded work. As Joel said, all of your sloping and pitching, this will be done in the excavation step. So the foundation that we have, the base that we have, is going to reflect in the final surface. So I believe you had a question.
Yeah, so in areas where, you know, obviously you guys all know in our area we have heavy clay, bad soil conditions. Now you can step on some bad clay here and it moves 3 feet away. you're good with that?
Honestly, this product is of sufficient structure, marginally over-engineered. That yes, we are still good with that. This structure is going to take the place of that base even in your poor soil conditions. If you have CBRs going all the way down to that one, even less, you still have the structure to hold that paver project straight. Now, this is a non-vehicular application, so if you have clay-borne soil and you're looking to do a paver offshoot of your driveway, that is an application that you're still going to need a little bit different product. That's where the drive grip comes in.
Right. So then the other question I have, or a couple more questions here, is to save some time within that excavation process of trying to get clay and bad soils perfect. You have your separation fabric.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys recommend, instead of trying to spend a bunch of time to get clay perfect, bringing in some sand
That would
And
actually be a fantastic
to level it off? And then my next question is, if there's settlement, if you do have some movement, what's the repair process look like? Because these things lock together, you got to go in. How do you repair something that? Let's just be honest. Something's going to move. Something's going to move in our climate. How does that look?
So the repair process for this, well, it's obviously something we all want to avoid. He brings up a good point. Things happen, things move. We don't live in the warmest climate out there. The repair process for this could simply be pull out the affected area. The panels are going to be in a 19-inch by 19-inch form, and so you could remove panels, assess the area, and reinstall. You would have to replace the aggregate, obviously. You would want to recompact that area, which you would want with a hand tamper, a light compactor, something like that. And you're not going to affect the surrounding area results. So it is repairable. Obviously, anytime we repair, it's going to be a little bit of labor. It is repairable, so it's not, you don't have to pull the whole project out and redo.
What do you think about simply putting more base material over the top of the hexabase panels? So for those low areas, instead of trying to remove the panels,
That could work.
simply adding more base, compacting that area down, significantly reducing the amount of time and labor that you have.
Yeah, so you don't have to pull each panel. You wouldn't have to pull each panel out.
I
'cause
think
can see
that would be
being
sufficient.
Yep.
a nightmare to pull it
That
out and put it back
that would
together.
take care of most. It would be a little bit larger area just because you would have to
So
level
just
and scrape.
kind of a
but-
typical settle repair if you.
Yep,
you-
this is replacing that 6 to 8 inches. So the same repairs that you would do as if you had that, you could do here.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
In a clay soil, wouldn't it make more sense to put it, I mean, you've excavated, and even if you had to smooth it out, either do it with, I'd probably do it with class 2, but then I'd put a geotex tile down, so that way if the clay does move or sink, it's acting as a bridge, reinforced with this hexabase, I'm still new to this and learning
Yeah.
about it, but.
No, as part of the process, and I think you just stepped in, it's not just the hexabase for the installation. We do recommend a separation layer. We're currently using a typical non-woven spun bond on that. But you could even go up to a 200-pound, slight reduction in water flow through it, but
Like an SS5 or
like an
something like that.
SS5, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we already recommend that in the process. It's not just the panels. We want to make sure there's separation between the native soil and that base layer.
Because I just think if you had a repair and the base is sinking there or dipping for some reason, that fabric's going to help bridge it, and it's going to minimize the sinking because the whole system should act as a bridge if it does settle in that one area.
And we totally agree and have that as our instruction. Yep. Any other questions?
All right. Now we move into our vehicular product. This is going to be our driveways. This is going to be our access roads, stuff like that. Anything that we're going to be parking or putting vehicles on is going to fall into the realm of the UltraDrive 3D. What this is a geogrid. And this is a three-dimensional geogrid that is specifically designed for traffic use. It's very similar to like the road-based grid stuff they use on the highways. Same concept, meant for driveways. What the UltraDrive 3D excels at is that we are going to replace up to 50% of the compacted base underneath the driveway. So if you're putting 12 inches of base down, we have the simulations and we have the strength in this product to reduce that in scenarios. Obviously, your thickness of base is going to be heavily dependent on what kind of soil we're working with. If we're working with clay-borne soils, coarse-graded sands, it's going to dictate your base layer a little bit. The performance is still the same. It is a three-dimensional vertical rib. It is going to have a height component to it as well. It is going to have a vertical rib that gives it that rigidity for both your stationary parked loads, as in a driveway, and your dynamic driving loads as well. Dramatically increased crew efficiency, where you can get more driveways, more projects done in your season. With having to dig less hole, having to transport in less space, less time on the road, moving material back and forth, you're going to be able to do driveways quicker and quicker, still with that peace of mind that you're putting the solid support down. System components are going to be very similar to the Hexabase, and this is on your guys' other sheet. We're going to use a separation fabric. In this case, we recommend SS5, something in that realm, kind of a 200-pound woven. Same fabric we're traditionally using in your guys' driveway applications. You're going to do a 1-inch course or a 1-inch layer of your compactable aggregate, and then you're going to follow that up with your drive grid. You're then going to do aggregate above that, so we want to sandwich that geogrid inside the aggregate, getting full interlock from top and bottom, really getting the maximum use out of that. And then you're going to do, if a paver driver, you're going to do your standard bedding sand, pavers, paver rail, spikes, normal system. This product is specifically designed to address base thickness. So this one's a little artsy. I do apologize for that. I can get you a sheet that has these on it, but this is the performance simulations of the UltraDrive 3D, ranging everywhere from very poor soils, approximate CBRs in like the 0.5. So we're talking those clay-borne, as you mentioned, you step and it's moving 3 feet away. That's going to be your very poor soils, heavy organic, clay-borne, that kind of stuff. Typically in simulations, ICPI would recommend somewhere around a 30-inch base for something like that to keep the world from moving. With drive grid, we can take that down to a 15-inch base. That is a lot less hole that we need to dig. Moving all the way up to your fair soils, your good, your coarse graded sands, you can still see that it's adding the strength to pull that required amount of base out of there. Same technology we have in highways and roadways, we're putting it in driveways.
Before you finish on this one, so you talked about 6 inches of base to 15 inches of base. It's a base reduction. Did you already share with them that we have those programs in place to help?
Yep. We have, if we have any kind of scenarios where, let's say, somebody is going to be using a driveway for heavy equipment. Let's say they have really off the scale, different kinds of soils, different kind of needs. We have all of the software on hand that we can kind of custom design per application or per need. So if we have a guy that's parking the dump truck on the side offshoot of the driveway, we can calculate and recommend the needed amount of base for that with the drive grid to still give that structure. So we do have that ability as well.
Have you done anything with permeables on this yet?
With permeables, that is a fantastic question. So with a permeable paver application, using ICPI's guidelines in that respect, the aggregate base is going to serve as two functions in that. We're going to use it for the base support, the structure of it, and we also use it as a reservoir to hold that rainwater, for the 2 historic rain events. While the drive grid will do a fantastic job at replacing the structure, it doesn't replace that reservoir quantity. So in accordance with ICPI guidelines for permeable pavers, because this would reduce the amount of that reservoir cavity underneath the system, that is not an application that you would really want to reduce that base, because that base has a dual function too.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay. Thank
There
you
you
very
go.
much, Chris. The Pavermate Z3, has anybody in this room had a chance to use SRW's new polymeric sand? Okay. Some of the companies that we've heard in talking with you guys in advance, of course, was Alliance and Technoseal's products, the Next Gel, the new G2 formulations. And all of those products have a similar function. Maybe they don't perform quite the same as sands did 10 or 15 years ago. And there's a real reason for that, benefits. There's also some drawbacks. But maybe those instructions that are on the bags don't accurately reflect the changes that have happened within the products. It is the active ingredients within those products that have changed, the polymers being used. And including in our product, it used to be that you could wet down the project. You could start from the top of your driveway, wet down the whole thing, come back 5 minutes later, do a second application. As a matter of fact, that was almost the preferred application so that the polymers didn't lift to the surface, right? Follow that up with maybe a third application of water, and in that time you did the whole driveway. Maybe it took about half an hour. Well, that was how we did it, because those polymers were lighter than water. If we oversaturated the joints, the polymers would actually lift to the surface and migrate out of the polymeric sand, helping to ensure that you got a haze on the surface of your project. Well, in the last, let's just say 5 years, it's been longer than that, but the companies have changed to a new type of polymer that does a really good job at gelling. So it gets sticky on you. It stays in the sand itself. So it's less likely to wash out and create hazing over the surface. The disadvantage of those products is if we stuck with a traditional install of misting down the whole driveway, coming back 5 minutes later doing the second application, you've done a really good job of helping to ensure that you're never going to activate that entire joint. You're going to put a skin over the top. Has anybody ever had skinning on the top of their joints? Does any of this ring a bell on maybe how we install it or what we've done in the past? In reality, and I tested all of those products, so we'll be able to give you some insight. And this will help you out whether you're using our polymeric sand or someone else's. Next Gel. That product is very good. Their polymers are a little bit better designed, and it's how fast do they absorb water, because the faster they absorb water, the less likely we are to get that water all the way down to the bottom of the joint and activate that expensive sand that we put 1.5 inches down those joints. So if we're only activating 1/8 of an inch on the top and you put 1.5 inches in, we've wasted a lot of money on sand that's never going to work properly. So their product, it takes about 45 seconds for it to really start to absorb that moisture and reduce the amount of water flow. Alliance is even, I'm going to say, worse, because at about 30 seconds, their polymers on the surface of those joints are actually starting to resist the absorption of water. It makes it increasingly difficult to get that water all the way through. Alliance, they take an extra step to add a surfactant in their sand. So if anybody's ever used that and they've watered it and all of a sudden you start getting bubbles out of the joints, all that is a fancy term for trying to put soap to make water wetter to get it down. But in the reality with those sands is that their polymers activate so quickly, you need to get the water on there very quickly. Alliance will, for example, tell you, do 30 square feet in 30 seconds. It's not a recommendation. I strongly suggest that you try to follow that to activate as much of that joint. We're no longer at the days where we can activate the whole surface, come back and keep wetting it down. Those days have changed. And that includes SRW as well. So 45 seconds to a minute for Next Gel. Again, we want to work in areas that are sufficiently managed in that amount of time. So that means 2 or 3 waterings, and misting first. And why do all the companies recommend misting the product first? It seems like a weird step, but anybody whoever's used polymeric sand knows If you put a regular spray over the top of your sand, your dry sand, it blows across the surface. It's very difficult to keep that in the joint and keep the height of that joint set. And so the misting really is to create some surface tension, not to activate the polymers, but to create enough surface tension on that sand so we're not blowing it all over the place. That's the only function of that application. So as soon as you do it and you wet down, in our case 200 square feet, we're going right back, changing that nozzle to a wetting step, basically the rain event, where we can put heavier amounts of water on. We don't have to worry about those polymers and polymeric sand migrating out of the joints onto the surface of the pavers. Any questions at this point? Is it kind of rung anybody's bell that makes sense about what we're talking about? These new polymeric sands out there are very unique in respect to that. So if we understand the activation of it, we can avoid a lot of the pitfalls. The final step is I told you about SRW. Alliance is 30 seconds. Next gel is about 45 seconds to a minute max. SRW, by simply adjusting how quickly those polymers absorb water, we give you a little bit more time to properly activate those joints. Our polymers will take up to 2 minutes to absorb that moisture before it starts to resist any further absorption of moisture. And so that really helps us out. We can do larger areas. We can do a 200 square foot section and expect success in that. But that 200 square feet, we're doing the whole activation, 3 waterings, a misting and 2 waterings in 2 minutes. It shouldn't take any longer than that. As a matter of fact, you would see that water would start to sit on the surface. We have some samples here that I can show you that show you exactly what happens in a little bit. We offer 4 different colors of polymeric sand, from ivory and black to tan and granite. The most common, of course, is the tan in our industry here in the upper Midwest. Granite comes in a close second. Black and ivory for those specialty jobs that you may have that we want to color match those joints in with the pavers themselves. The benefits of SRW's Pavermate Z3, very simply, 0 haze, 0 dust, 0 problems. And I apologize in the back here. This is our polymeric sand. And we can pass this around. No dust. This is a competition's polymeric sand. That is also a no dust formula. No dust doesn't mean that when you dump out that bag heavy that you're not going to get, some of the fines pluming out. It means everything drops down. It means when we're sweeping it or compacting that project, we're not going to have that excess dust that's a complaint of the neighbors for where the job is being done, for the individual user getting it in their nose, on their arms when they're sweating and getting sticky. So we've been able to drop out those polymers and get them to settle in with the sand and lightly bind to the sand. So the 0 haze, clear polymer technology, the polymers simply dry clear, along with the removal of Portland fly ash and crushed limestone. I'll get into why companies use those and what SRW has been able to do to reduce the likelihood of hazing happening on a job. 0 dust. Again, there's a chemical added to our sand that lightly binds the polymers without activating the polymers, but lightly binds those to the sand so that we can sweep that sand further. We can have a cleaner installation. We don't have to deal with that residue because it is lightly bonded to the sand. And 0 problems. What we mean by 0 problems is worst case scenario, we have an unexpected rain event just after we finish the job. In as little as 10 minutes, you're going to have activation. There's a reactive technology within SRW's polymeric sand that will prevent the polymers in as little as 10 minutes from washing out. So if we had an unexpected rain event, we're not talking a light shower that, it should be okay. We're talking a rain event, a heavy downpour. These joints will not wash out. If anybody has any questions at any point, raise your hand, blurt it out. We can talk about it.
These cure hard or pliable?
Is our polymeric sand hard or pliable?
What's it cure?
I was going to do this a little bit later.
Okay.
It is going to be very pliable. I've activated some samples here. All we did is put sand inside of a top of a cur jar, We're gonna take it out. This is probably 20 minutes old at this point. I did it just before we started today. And by the way, this is a competition sand. This is their haze-free rapid set technologies. Not gonna name the company.
I've noticed over the years, some products get hard, and then when it rains again, they get pliable again, and they go back and forth from hard to soft.
Yes, and originally, 10 or 15 years ago, that was the idea behind polymeric sands. You know, we wanted them to get soft. We wanted them to self-heal. But with the new technologies out there, to be honest with you, they're less flexible than they traditionally have been because that sand is not, it's not allowing it to absorb that moisture. I'm going to start in the back here and I'll get you guys a sample up front. This is our sand, this is our competition sand. If the competition sand makes it up to the front, they would be surprised. It simply does not bond together. That's 20 minutes old. What do you think of the integrity of SRW's Z3 sand? The reactive technology means that chemically, we've started to kind of crystallize those polymers within our sand so they cannot wash out. The integrity is already there in 20 minutes. The competition is not even comparable. Now, under ideal conditions, these sands will both set up very nicely.
What does the industry think is best for structural, to have it pliability or to have it rock solid?
When it comes to pliability, we don't need the level of pliability that the old sands have. These still are very flexible in relation. It does not become a mortared component where it has absolutely no flexibility. Any movement at all would cause it to break and ultimately break apart. That's not true. These sands, SRW sand as well as the new competitive sands out there, they're not going to absorb water at the same rate. So they're going to stay rigid even after they're wet. As a matter of fact, our product, if you allow it to cure out and put it in water, after 24 hours we have about 1/8 of an inch of penetration. That doesn't mean that that whole joint is so rigid that it can't move in the event that there was some freeze-thaw issues or something like that. We're not repairing these projects. It does become a structural component even more than what the sands did in 10 or 15 years ago. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? So here is a video just about the clarity of the polymers. Well, that worked out well. Maybe there's no video for you guys today. We're going to have to skip the video. But this is a sheet of polymers. We take 1/8 of a teaspoon of the polymers, simply activate it with water inside a Petri dish. What's probably hard to see in the back of the room, they're crystal clear. The polymers themselves cannot add a haze on the surface. It does have to do with the other admixes that the companies have out there in their recipe. A recipe is not as simple as taking some clear polymers and putting it in sand and calling it good. Sands wouldn't be $30 a bag or maybe less than that if that's all that it was.
Theoretically, they could be on top and you wouldn't see them, what you're saying.
Theoretically, they could be on top. Yep, and admittedly, you are going to have some polymers on the surface. There's no question. Polymeric sand doesn't just have polymers in the mix. We have pH adjusters, we have reactive technologies, and not all of those are crystal clear. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ruin it for everybody, but all of the polymeric sands are made in cement plants. These plants are designed to do bagged cements, and what is the cheapest product that they can put in their mix to adjust the pH? And I'll get into that in just a second, but it is Portland cement, right? Technoseal uses a minor amount of Portland cement. They've never gotten away from it. They don't advertise it. To them, it's insignificant. And the way that their product performs, it performs very well. But the reason why they put these in there, whether it's Portland cement, fly ash, or crushed limestone, is to simply increase the pH. We know that the polymers absorb water very well, but we don't want to go back to the olden days where they softened up every time they got wet. Now, we're adding the Portland, the fly ash, the crushed limestone in there to increase the pH, because these polymers were originally designed for cement applications, and under these conditions, under that high pH, they don't absorb water at the same rate. They still absorb water, they still are flexible, but not at the same rate that we would see without the addition of these. If all we're trying to do is adjust the pH in our mix, we can do that without using cement, fly ash, or crushed limestone, because each one of those products leave the potential to leave a haze on the surface. So we're going to have residue of polymers on the surface. We activate those and they have some of this in there. Where does that haze come from? It comes from these products here. So Pavermate Z3 does not include any of those in the mix. If all we have to do is adjust the pH, we've come up with a better method, better ingredients that are not part of the cement industry that we can use that dry clear. These are the look of our bags. These bags are a heavy-duty 6 mil bag. They normally, what we would have is slight holes in the top of the bag to allow air to escape during filling of the bags. These bags no longer have that. The only way for moisture to get into these bags, of course, would be the valve. There's a 4-inch valve in which we put all the product in the bags, and there's a channel that in the back that allows 2.5 times the amount of air to escape out. So these are significantly more water resistant than previous bags in the market or competitive sands. We talked in the back about a proper installation. We ended up with hazing on a job, whether it was, with a competitive sand. And what do we do? What is the proper installation of putting in polymeric sand? SRW spends a lot of time and effort on the back of our bag to include very clear instructions with photos that show exactly what's happening. These are some of the photos. But after we install the pavers and we compact them to adjust the height of the pavers, we come back, we sweep in that first application of polymeric sand. Goes over the top. Before we do anything else, before any compaction occurs, we recommend sweeping off any excess polymeric sand. That sand is lightly bonded with polymers. If we were to compact over the top, we can separate the polymers from the sand, and we could help ensure that those polymers are being driven into the pores of the concrete. So we recommend simply sweeping off the project. In this case, putting down a type of fabric like an SS5, a woven 200-pound fabric. Oftentimes when we're doing an install like this, we'll already have it on the site, and compacting over the top of that. That way it's not a metal plate going over the top of concrete. We don't have to worry about scuffing. We also don't have to worry about that force driving those polymers into the surface or the pores of the concrete. Is there any questions at this point? Different from the competition, SRW does recommend that you sweep off the surface. Alliances out there, they recommend that you can sweep the sand over, compact over the top of it, use that as your cushioning layer so you're not scuffing the pavers. But what is that doing? Those polymers, that admix that they have in their recipe, is just ensuring that you drive that into the surface. We'll try this other video here, but I don't think any of them are set up today. This is to show the no dust. We're going to put it to the extremes and put a bag inside the cement mixer. And if you can see this crystal clear, you'll see a very light amount of polymers that would even come out of that mix. But notice that you can see the sand. Even at a distance, you can see the sand turning in there. The competition's no dust formula. You can't even see the sand in there, and all you see is the haze coming out. That no dust formula that we have. Simple technology, again, we need to make sure that we're not activating the polymers, so we can't put water in the sand to get those to bind, to pre-stick to the sand. We have to come up with a different means, a long-lasting, something that's not going to impact the project or create issues of potential hazing on its own. We've spent a lot of time and effort creating that process. So the no dust is a big thing, because what do we have? We have new laws that came into place within the last couple of years about respirable crystalline silica, RCS. We'll talk about that very briefly. But what makes our sand the best even before it's mixed with polymers? We don't just quarry out the sand, pick one that looks like a good color. We take this into the manufactured sand process, which may not seem like a big deal, but it requires a lot of steps. Our sands are washed even before we do anything. We wash the sand, help to take out the finest of fines. It is then put through a kiln, a dryer. In that process, they're incorporating a lot of air in there. We're pulling out extra fines from that as well. The final step is to screed that or screen it off. So we're pulling out the large particles, and the finest of fines get put into separate screens. And what we're left with is a very clean sand that you can put your hand in and it doesn't leave a residue. That's necessary, because if those polymers are going to be clear on the surface of pavers, if any company tells you that there's absolutely no polymers on the surface before you activate it, that's not true. We know that that has to be the case. So we need to make sure that everything we put in our mix is as clean as possible. And that starts with the sand. Once our admix is blended, it's the cleanest sand available in the industry, with zero haze, zero dust, zero problems. You can try one more video here, see if it'll work. That's the competition's 10-minute rain safe, or 15-minute rain safe sand. After 10 minutes. That's SRW Z3. What makes our sand rain safe within 10 minutes? It is that chemical reaction that I talked about briefly, is that we're able to put additional ingredients in there that cause those polymers to essentially crystallize together. Still a very flexible bind, but if you can see on those samples that went back, I hope they made it back somewhere towards the middle, is that the sand is clearly together, holding together. The sample we should be able to bend and see that that's holding together. We can move it around. Breaking a piece off is challenging. It doesn't take the world, but it's holding together. It's holding that polymeric sand together. And once that occurs within that first 10 minutes of activation, you know that that joint is protected. We know that it starts to resist the absorption of any further incorporation of water. It helps to guarantee that that project is going to be successful, even in the worst of conditions. The worst of conditions meaning it would rain shortly after installation. Does anybody have any questions? How does Pavermate Z3 compare to other polymeric sands on the market? We've kind of talked about that a little bit here already. But competitive instructions, they say compact with sand over the pavers. It was interesting that we talked about that before we even started today. You don't have to blow. Activate with one watering. These are some of the comments that they tell you. Interestingly enough, though, I went to a presentation out on the East Coast, and they said you didn't have to blow the sand off the surface. Simply sweep it off and activate it. They had to kind of sidestep that a little bit even before their first year of introduction in that, but you need to set the joint height, right? You want everything even. Well, what's the best way to do that? Might as well just take that leaf blower. So they're already taking a step back from their simplified instructions and recommending that that process still remain. We're overloading the pores with fines by compacting over the surface of the pavers. We're increasing the chance of hazing. And we're activating just over half the area as the Z3 in the same amount of time. Half the area is 30 square feet in 30 seconds. SRW recommends 200 square feet in 2 minutes to get the proper application. That has to do with how quickly those polymers are activating and the effectiveness of wetting those down properly. Competitive sands. We did talk about a couple here. We talked about Technoseal and Alliance. There are other ones out there as well. But some of those polymeric sands will swell. So if you have a customer that likes to put their polymeric sand right to the surface of the pavers, well, that's not recommended by polymeric sand manufacturers or even paver manufacturers. Some people like the look. They like that flat look. Those joints will swell. So during activation, they will actually rise up above the surface of the pavers. It becomes a trip hazard. It becomes an area for you to scuff off that surface. And if those sands inherently have problems with skinning, then you have an area where that polymeric sand fails to set up at all. You know, proper cleaning is critical as sand is setting on the surface and very difficult, if not impossible, to remove. Proper cleaning is what we need to talk about. If we're trying to rush the last step, just keep in mind polymeric sand is the last step on a project many times. And if that goes wrong, the entire project reflects the quality of work done with the polymeric sand. It is a step that requires a little bit more attention. It's not necessarily something that we can leave the laborers to do and we can move on to our next job. It's something that one of the professionals, one of the leads on your project should really be focusing on. Because this is the last thing that you do and can have an impact on the overall performance or at least look of that project. Marketing with misinformation. Again, telling the consumer, the contractor, what they want to hear versus the proper way to install it. If we start skipping steps with polymeric sands, we're going to have problems. And telling you to sweep it off, compact over the top of sand, you can sweep it off without having to blow it first. All we're doing is helping to ensure that those problems are going to be present at some point in time. So SRW follows a traditional install. We're trying to clean that off. We're trying to prevent any of those potentials for hazing to occur. Because even with as clean as our sand is, if it's done improperly, there's always a potential for something to go wrong, right? One of the other things is not trying to rush putting sand on your job. If it rained the night before and you need to get that job done, polymeric sand is the last step, and you think that those pavers look dry on the surface, try it. Take one paver to the side, put polymeric sand over the top, let it sit for a few minutes, blow it off, and activate it. The moisture within those pavers will come to the surface because the different ingredients in the polymeric sand will draw that moisture up. And we can see if we're going to have some of those issues. Is it still too wet? Even though that surface may look dry, we'll be able to tell. We want to avoid those pitfalls. Our battery is running low. Do you happen to have a charger?
Yep, I do have a charger.
Paver producers are starting to say they don't recommend polymeric sand. Has anybody run across that? Who are some of the producers we have here in the Twin Cities? We have Unilock, we still have Anchor, or are they a board or Old Castle product now?
We have Belgium,
We have Belgard, okay.
which is Anchor.
Okay. Some of the other products that may be offered just outside of the Twin Cities, maybe a Borger product. There are a number of polymeric or paver manufacturers that are starting to say, don't use polymeric sand. Why do you think that is? Does anybody have any reasons or any comments? Is it because it doesn't perform, it doesn't do as it's designed to do? We have one more slide here. You bet.
Joey, got a question back here on.
Yeah, go ahead. A question at any time, go ahead.
No, it wasn't a question, it was an answer, but you're gonna get to it, so.
What was your answer?
Well, weren't you saying it's because the, like, stuff that happens with polymeric, like hazing effects and stuff, it doesn't go back to the polymeric people, it goes back to the paver people? Why is this paver not look right?
Absolutely. And that's really what we were going to encompass here, is the fact that they don't recommend it because as individuals, as salesmen for the paver companies, they're the ones going out to these jobs, and if somebody has a complaint and you just did a paver install and it doesn't look the way that those samples were here, well, you gotta call somebody, right?
Right.
You're gonna call the person, it's the pavers that look bad. They spend a lot of time on jobs to find out that there are situations where it wasn't installed properly. Maybe there's an inherent defect in the type of polymeric sand out there. You know, we can't blame everything on the contractor, but sometimes it feels like people are doing that. And SRW, we stand behind our products. If there is ever a problem, we're a local company. We'd like to think that we can come out in a timely fashion and take a look at your jobs. So to have a manufacturer say that to you, we're local here, so it's certainly possible. We have plenty of employees. Versus somebody that's out of Canada. Who's going to get here faster? We're going to support this industry and support this market, and we do that very well. But it's one of the last jobs on the project, polymeric sand. If it goes wrong, it shows, and it shows very quickly. Paver manufacturers spend a large amount of their time dealing with sand hazing issues because it looks like maybe it could be efflorescence or it could be hazing, and to the general consumer, they all look the same. In reality, some polymeric sands manufacturers simplify their instructions, increasing the amount of issues. We've talked about that a number of times. SRW does not do that. We stick with a traditional install, significantly reducing the chances of something happening. We provide user tips to avoid those pitfalls. We provide videos online and resources on our website. We brought Eric here today. He's new to our marketing department. He's one of the graphic designers, but in his responsibility and role at SRW is to help make sure that we have all these resources readily available at your hand with your phone, or in front of you. You'll notice that we also provided our business cards here for the two product managers. On that business card is my cell phone. If anybody were to call it, while I wouldn't answer it right now, you know that we would be able to answer it very quickly. In addition, you can contact Hedberg, which would in turn put you in contact with our salesman, who is in the back of the room, Darren Kolke. These are the people that support Hedberg on a daily basis, from marketing to product managers to our salesmen. We're here to help. Follow the instructions on the bag and use common sense. We always want to push that job so we can get to the next one. Polymeric sand, I would argue, is not one of those projects that you want to try to force your way through and try to just get it done because it has to be done. If it's not the right conditions, don't do it. One time that you have to go back to a job and address something totally negates any savings that you had by getting that done early. So polymeric sand is successful. And the companies that say they don't recommend polymeric sand, they also have a caveat. It was Unilock that told me that. But Unilock had in their presentation, they don't recommend it. They don't recommend it because people aren't following the instructions. Individual companies are trying to simplify those instructions. Stick with what you know, what's been successful in the past. Avoid the pitfalls. And work with a company that's willing to support you. And Hedberg and SRW is willing to support you as a contractor. Is there any questions about polymeric sands before we move into cleaners or sealers? And we can talk about these and come back to them if you do have a question. I guess we're not done. We had one more slide. What happens if it all goes wrong? Okay, you did everything right, it rained, it was an unplanned event, we ended up getting some hazing that was unanticipated. The nice thing is, with SRW's polymeric sand, if it all goes wrong, we have an easy way to fix it. A heated pressure washer does not require any additional chemicals or acid washes. We don't have to try to abrade the surface and get off the sand. There are some companies out there that have such strong polymeric sand that if you do get it on the surface, it is all but impossible to get off. Ours will simply come off with a heated pressure washer. If it all goes wrong here, it rains during install, basic prep is not followed, use of a compactor or a leaf blower, didn't activate the sand for multiple days after install. Now, this is one that surprisingly we get a lot of calls on. A lot of calls, was 2 calls last year. But the fact that we had 2 calls surprised me. If you put your polymeric sand in there, it's water activated, right? Water, humidity in the air, things like that. If you wait even just 2 days or 24 hours overnight, you're going to find that those polymers will activate, but there's not enough water or humidity in the air to get those to turn into a gel, to bind everything together. So you put a very expensive play sand in your joints if you don't activate that right away. So if you're putting in polymeric sand and you end up with a situation that's unavoidable, you have to leave, cover it up, try to do what you can and avoid those situations where we have polymeric sand in the joints for an extended period of time. Only put in what you can activate in a reasonable amount of time or on that shift. Leaving bags on the side of a house and the sand gets wet. That does happen too. A lot of homeowners don't want to put it in their garage. Well, these are products that like to absorb moisture, and we want to make sure that we're protecting them for the investment that you're making. Polymeric sand does work. It works very well. There's a reason for it. And the companies, the paver manufacturers that recommend not to put it in, it's because they want to reduce their workload. If you follow the instructions properly, these products are very successful time and again. Our product tends to be more successful than the competition, and we're not as old as they are. Just so you know, our new product, the Z3, was introduced in 2018, and we have tripled the amount of sales of that product nationwide in 2 years. We have sold, and we're growing at a rate that is unbelievable. So this product is easily available. Of course, we are a company based out of the Twin Cities. These products can be shipped next day if they weren't in stock here. It's not a big deal. Any questions? Finally, we have the Z3, not the Z3, forgive me, the Extreme Polymeric Sand. This is for joints up to 6 inches. It is a very clean sand. Compaction is a problem because this product is really designed for wet cast and flagging type materials. You can't compact over the top of those typically, right? They're too thin, they're too big of a piece. We risk cracking the stones. Compaction is necessary though. So we want to make sure in those wider joints that while this sand has certainly gotten finer than Alliance's Gator Dust or even our old polymeric sand that we had, compaction is necessary. Make sure we're getting that sand into and around the stones, up and underneath them, that before we even activate that project, we want to make sure there's stability within each of those stones. If it's not stable and you can walk on it and it's teetering on you, stabilize that before you activate the sand. That only helps to guarantee that if you don't do that, that there will be a problem sooner than later.
How do you compact it? Like
What's that?
How do you compact the big joints? Like with a brick hammer or something, or what?
It could be lightly tapping around the edge with a rubber mallet or something. It could be as simple as taking a wooden stake. You got a pointy end, you got a blunt end. The larger areas take the blunt end, drive it down. I mean, we're not trying to shake this and drive it down. It's a finer gradation of sand, so we're going to end up with better compaction just naturally. But it is that process of making sure that we're closing up each spot. Compaction, even in a standard joint for a paver, we're trying to reduce the amount of airspace in between those particles of sand. We're trying to drive that sand so tight together that those polymers that are surrounding the particles of sand simply swell and hold everything in place. If there's air in there and we get air entrapment, We're not using as much sand, but again, we're losing the points of contact that make that polymeric sand as strong as it's designed to be. We're going to move on from polymeric sands, and we're going to get into the cleaners. We have two different types or families of cleaners. We have specialty cleaners, which involve spot treatments. If we have a situation where we have grease or oil, organic stains, we have any of those things, rust, we want to treat those areas first before we use a general cleaner. And just so you know, we recommend that for every application that we're sealing, we do use and recommend a general cleaner. Wow, we went through a lot of those. Efflorescence cleaner is a general cleaner. If we have a situation where it's a new installation and we have some efflorescence that's bloomed, this is a mild acid, go ahead and use this over the top. It's a very straightforward process. And one thing that I do recommend with almost all of our cleaners, and certainly all of our general cleaners, this is close to a general cleaner, but it's specialty, forgive me, is we want to wet that surface down. While these products are considered concentrates, we want to wet the surface first of the pavers, whatever surface we're cleaning, to a point that we've saturated it. So if it's the joints of the pavers, we expect water to be sitting in those joints. The surface of the pavers should be wet enough that we don't see the texture or the pores on the surface of those pavers. If there's ever a time that we don't have that amount of water on that surface, simply add more. It's at that point that this product, we had put a watering can, put a gallon of it in a watering can, cover about 200 square feet, and over the course of 15 to 20 seconds, distribute that entire gallon over this area. Once these cleaners go on, as a general rule, especially with acids, we don't want them to sit on there. If acids work very well at cleaning efflorescence off the surface, and we recommend 2 minutes, well, 4 minutes must be better, right? In almost every case, if that happens, it's going to make it equal or worse to what you originally had. And the reason for that is simple. An acid is going to likely break those bonds of the efflorescence on the surface of the pavers, but all that efflorescence, those salts, they're heavier than water. And what are we putting them in? We're putting them in a solution of water and cleaner. So if we let those sit around without constantly being moved on the surface, we're going to help ensure that everything we've lifted off and put into the solution is going to drop right back down and lightly bond to that surface again. If that does happen, and we don't keep it moving around and rinsed off within 2 to 3 minutes, the application to repair that is to use the same product and do it the right way the next time. So if that were to happen. Has anybody used any acids or cleaners and found that they've not worked as designed or were challenging at best?
I've used muriatic acid with water diluted. Not great results.
How much of a dilution? Most times when you buy
Usually-
muriatic acid, it's about a 30% concentration. Would
That's-
you agree?
Yeah.
What concentration did you get it down to?
1/3 acid, 2/3 water.
That's very strong. That's about a 10% concentration. If anybody ever had the desire to use a muriatic acid, I would always recommend starting with a 5% concentration. And believe it or not, oftentimes that can work. The other thing is when you use concentrated acids that you can buy at hardware stores versus a product specifically designed for it, we do risk having that absorb into the surface at a much greater rate than what these type of products would be. But there is a price point and there's a cost advantage for using those type of products. I did have one situation where I went to 2 jobs from a contractor and he used muriatic acid. He claimed that it was at a 5% concentration, between 5 and 10. And he was so proud of these jobs, and they were an old Anchor Charleston paper, if I remember right. I went to these jobs, and they looked like exposed aggregate, and he diluted them down. But the length of time that it sat on there, not properly cleaning it off after it was put down, he ended up removing the entire surface. These pavers looked like the worst pavers I had ever seen. He was pretty proud of it because he brought the colors out by putting a sealer over the top.
Sure.
But it was an exposed aggregate surface on a brand new paver. I've never seen something like that. And I would really caution of using some of those products without some prior experience to it. What makes this unique is not just that it's an acid. We put some surfactants in there so that that cleaner tends to sit on the surface and not migrate in. The surfactants also help to create a slurry, kind of a foaming action, so that once we get to that level, we can migrate that cleaner from one section of that 200 square feet to another. But that whole process of putting the cleaner down, scrubbing the area, and starting to rinse it off should really only take 2 to 3 minutes. Anything longer than that, we risk having those cleaners soak into the surface and popping their ugly head at some point in the future. We can almost guarantee that if we're using heavier concentrations of other products. So, what does that surfactant also help with? We want to make sure that once that cleaner goes on, that it comes off completely. If we keep seeing foam in our rinse water, keep rinsing it down. Typically, we find with these type of products, we have to rinse that area 3 to 4 times for every section that we clean. So it's not just to put the cleaner down, rinse it off, we move on. We're rinsing that down 3 to 4 times. So hopefully that's helpful to some of us here, that process does take a little bit longer. The mold, moss, and mildew cleaner surprisingly works very well. Surprisingly, because the technology is very simple, but when I refer to a cleaner, I expect when I put that cleaner down, that same day, that area is going to be ready to move on to the next step, and that's not the case with this product. I would say that this is a mold, moss, and mildew killer. That's what this product does. It's an amine, so the active ingredient is in the ammonia family, smells like Windex. Very pleasant when you put it down. But it'll take dormant moss, for example, kind of that greenish brown, and you spray it with this, and 2 minutes later you come back and look at it, it's going to be the same color as that gentleman's shirt back there. It's going to be so bright and lush that it's almost like you fertilized it. And that's what it's designed to do. It's supposed to go in on a cellular basis into that fungus and cause the cell walls to break apart, releasing the chlorophyll or whatever it's called, and destroying that from the inside out. So we let that process happen within the first hour or two. We let that area dry out from the course of 3 to 7 days. We can either come back and sweep it off. We can power wash it if we need to. If we're going to power wash it in the first place, what's the necessity of using a product like this? Well, as a mold, moss, and mildew killer, it also helps prevent those spores from regerminating on that surface. In our tests, we did an area that was inherently bad. The joints were filled with moss. We sprayed this down in an area about the size of a 3x3 table. Cleaned it off, swept it off. We didn't do any pressure washing. We just let that area sit. 2 years later, everything else around it is lush and green. Those joints are full of moss. That area, for at least 2 years, had no sign of mold, moss, or mildew in it. We knew the spores were all around it, but this product worked very well. Not only that, this can be used on asphalt shingles, vinyl siding, anywhere where we're going to have the issues with algae, moss, mildew. It works very well for that. Any questions in regard to this product? It's a concentrate, so it goes down 5 parts water to 1 part cleaner. 1 quart will make 1.5 gallons. 1 gallon will make 6 gallons. The OC is the organic stain cleaner. This product is an oxidizer. Very simply, bleach is an oxidizer. What is the other one that you can put in clothes? OxyClean. It's the same type of family of products. But how this product works, if you have organic stains, you have tannins from leaves, grasses, whatever on the surface, you wet the surface down with water. This will come out in a pelletized form. Screed it over the surface, scrub it in, let it sit for 2 minutes, scrub it a second time, and rinse it off. To be honest with you, I've had multiple times where this product shows that it didn't completely remove the stain from the surface. You have to trust me on this one. Let that dry out. It will continue working. That oxidizing will, when that surface dries out, it completely removes or almost entirely removes that stain. We have to wait for that area to dry to show that effectiveness though. What time is it, Darren?
Order 2.
The cleaner degreaser, a great product we've had for many years. It can be used in concentrate or slightly diluted. If we have grease or oil spots on the surface of concrete or pavers, I recommend that you use this in concentrate. This is one of the few times that we do not pre-wet the surface. Put it down. This is an oil-based cleaner, so there's oil in this product. It's called delimonene. It's a citrus oil, so it's going to go in there and break down those bonds of that oil on the concrete. And then we recommend hitting it with a pressure washer to remove it. We can scrub it a little bit, but ultimately the chemical reaction between those two ingredients are amazing. It works very well, but it can be diluted down 1-to-1 with water if necessary for some lighter hazing areas. The rust eliminator in the acid family again. Interestingly enough, if anybody's ever put a penny in Coke, they found how it turns that penny around in 24 hours, makes it look new again. Same active ingredient in Coke is what's in here, phosphoric acid. So it works on oxidized metals. Oxidized metals like rust, you know, you can have copper stains, you can have any number of things. It works well on that, but in concentration on the surface of concrete, we could etch that as well. So make sure you're pre-wetting that surface before you use this product. If I were to have one cleaner in the back of my truck for most any stains, whether it's gum, tar, rubber, to grease and oil stains, it's the TR, tar, gum, and rubber remover. It is a fantastic solvent-based formulation, also the active ingredient of that citrus oil or the delimonene. There's nothing else that works better. In larger volumes, we even use this product as a sealer stripper. So don't use this on a previously sealed project. It's going to work so well it'll remove the sealer from there as well. But it's a fantastic product. It comes in a 29-ounce can, and it can be used for almost any situations or spot cleaners that you have. It works very well. The xylene is going to come in handy. That comes in handy for cleaning out our sprayers, for diluting out sealers, or to repair a solvent-based sealer application that went horribly wrong where it rained right afterwards and you got blushing on it. How about not stripping a project and simply going over the top of it with xylene and a roller and bringing the life of that project back? We know that there's sealers on there. Wouldn't it be nice to just have to go over a 1,000 square foot job and be done in a half an hour versus having to reseal that or possibly strip it, clean it, and then reseal it? You can have it all done in a half an hour using the xylene. We'll get into that in a little bit, but the idea here is if we stick with the solvent-based, or what we call our extreme line of sealers, those acrylics in those formulas are designed to dissolve in this product right here, in xylene. So if something went terribly wrong, we got roller marks on the surface, it is very simple to repair. Saturate the surface with xylene, roll it out with one of our rollers until you soften the acrylics or turn them essentially back into a liquid. And that's what the xylene would be used for. Sealer stripper, if all goes wrong. If all goes wrong, we have the sealer stripper. By the way, this is the least sold product that we offer in our product lineup. And I'm very happy about that. We make a good enough product that we really don't need this material right here. But if it does go wrong, this is a great product to be used. Very similar in nature, that delimonene solvent or that oil-based product mixed with some very high solvents. You set it on the surface, let it sit 5 to 10 minutes, hit it with a pressure washer. Your sealers will come off in a white snotty mess. You'll see where they're at and see what needs to be cleaned and what doesn't. It works very well. And I'm happy to say it's a product we don't sell very much of. When we get to general cleaners, so we had the specialty cleaners meant for a specific purpose. When we get to the general cleaners, I want you to know whether it's natural stone, wet cast, or pavers, concrete or clay, we recommend using a general cleaner before each application. And why is that? We want to make sure that surface is free of dust, oils, grease, construction debris. These cleaners are specifically designed to do that. It is the process of cleaning and using a chemical cleaner that's going to help ensure that your sealers are done properly each and every time. Without getting into each one of these, I wanted to introduce some of our new sealers for you, so we'll pass by it. But if anybody has any questions, please let me know. New products for 2020. We always look to round out our product line and offer the best options available to you. So you have availability of these products. Some of them are water-based, others are solvent-based. Some of them have a very specific purpose. And we try to do that very competitively. So these are the new products for 2020. The SGX is a water-based penetrating sealer. It soaks in, it creates a waterproofing layer on the surface of the pavers. This one has a nice little hidden secret, and that's that it's a stain guard as well, so there's a fluorosilane in there that helps prevent the absorption of grease and oils into the surface of pavers specifically. We can use this on pavers or wet cast, not intended for natural stone. And it works very well, and it comes in at a decent price point. So for those commercial jobs or driveways where we risk getting grease or oil, we're not going to prevent that drop from getting on the surface, but what happens is, opposed to soaking in and spreading out like oil typically does, this is going to stay in a droplet form. If that oil has a chance to essentially oxidize and create a film or a ring around the outside, it's as simple as taking warm water and warm soapy water with a scrub brush and scrubbing it right off. In addition to that, we have the Stone and Wet Cast LGX. This is a low gloss formula, high enhancing, low sheen or shine on the surface. So this was to round out our product line. For years, we've just never had those products in our product lines, and we've been able to complete that process. Our specialty line of sealers typically are for a very specific purpose or can be used across multiple product lines, and that's where the Dual Guard comes in. The Dual Guard itself is a acrylic sealer offering a high enhancement, but it also has the ability to put the siloxanes or silanes, the waterproofing component, into the surface of that concrete. So should that acrylic, that enhancing aspect of the sealer, wear off over time, that surface is still protected by having the waterproofing treatment there. CounterGuard is a product we sell in quartz, the only product we sell in quartz, intended for outdoor surfaces, outdoor countertops, whether it's natural stone or concrete. RWX is for retaining walls, vertical applications, works very well. It's a water-based penetrating sealer. Premium Stone Seal comes in 4 different options. We have 2 different penetrating type sealers. Both of these are solvent based. As a matter of fact, all 4 of those options are solvent based for stone, because if something does go wrong, it's very easy to repair using the xylene. We have a standard penetrating sealer, waterproofer. The SPSX, which is in the middle there, that product is a waterproofer along with stain guard. And then we have the high gloss and low gloss formulations as well. Again, we're running short on time here, so I don't want to keep you longer than we need. The paver sealers, you can see we have a whole slew of products. Go ahead, 5 minutes. We have a whole slew of products from the standard sealers, which we'll call water-based, the PS, the LG, and the HG products. These are all considered water-based sealers. The X version of them, I'd like to simply say they're all the solvent-based, the professional series. But this product right here, the PSX, is double the concentration of the PS in the active ingredients, a siloxane and silane blend that will contain about 10% active ingredients. The LGX and HGX are the solvent-based versions of their water-based cousins. And again, what do we have after that? Wet cast. And then we have the wet cast. WPSX, WLGX, and WHGX. Again, all of these are intended for commercial applications around pools, driveways, things like that, if you were to ever use wet cast on a driveway at least. These products are specifically intended for that purpose, to soak in, give the proper enhancement if you're using the LGX or the HGX, and has been a wonderful addition to our product lineup. I know that I went through the sealers very quickly. Does anybody have any questions or comments about them? Yes, sir.
Yeah, on the sealers, everybody in here knows salt is a paper And
Everybody knows solvent is what?
Pavers worst enemy.
Paver's worst enemy?
Salt.
Salt, yes, sir.
If there have been any testing on these sealers as far as salt, the customer's gonna do it regardless if you tell them not to.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because the manufacturers of the pavers themselves are using the siloxane-silane combination in their recipe. When they're creating the pavers, they're doing it for two reasons. One is selfish and one makes complete sense. The one that makes complete sense is they want to try to waterproof that. By waterproofing that paver, goes right into the second option, they're reducing the presence of efflorescence that may present on the face of that paver. They call them admixes. Reapel Plus is a BASF product. The manufacturers put that into their mix even before they press them into pavers. And so they believe in it. The manufacturers are poured concrete and designers of the sealers for those type of things. They believe so heavily in the penetrating sealer aspect, the waterproofing aspect, that all bridge decks. If you see a new bridge deck go down, you'll see that oftentimes it's pigmented white. That's just to show that the penetrating sealer went down. Because what I didn't tell you is penetrating sealers don't offer any enhancement. You can't tell that they've been put on after they dry out. The only time you can tell that they're physically there is when it rains. And after install, it'll bead up. The water will bead up and drain right off. A year after that, after dust and debris gets on the surface, well, that beading action is not as effective. So water's going to tend to sit on there a little bit. But how can you tell that it's still there? How fast does that paver absorb water from the surface? So if it's raining all day, you can look at it 2 hours after it started raining and still see that that surface hasn't absorbed the level of water that it would right after you put a hose on it on an untreated concrete or paver.
Hey Bill, do you have the Pro Slicer salt slide there? Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't, and that was a good example. I'm going to have to describe it to you guys. We had a situation where we took two pavers, a manufacturer here in the Twin Cities, and we put a concentrated version of just salt water on there. So we took Pro Slicer, the pigmented salt that people spread out around their businesses, and we heated up the water to the point that it wouldn't absorb any more salt. We poured it over a treated paver with our PS and an untreated paver. Interestingly enough, the water absorbed into the untreated paver and settled in the bottom half inch of that paver within 30 minutes. It soaked all the way through a standard paver. The other paver that was treated on the top, the salt and the pigment that was in that salt, that purple pigment and the color that they put in there, stayed on the surface and crystallized in a ring that surrounded that droplet that was on there. And I wish I had that here to show you. I have it in some other presentations if anybody would like to see it. But it shows the effectiveness that even if your customers don't want their project sealed, this is cheap insurance. If there's no efflorescence when you leave a job and there's a possibility it's a wet area, why wouldn't you put down that insurance? And what I want to share with you is whether it's a film forming sealer or a penetrating sealer, if that surface is no longer the easiest point for water to escape from, I would argue with anybody. Go ahead.
Page 17, the catalog, right-hand side, it has that.
Well, let's all take a look at that if you don't mind. Page 17 of our catalog. You can see it in the upper right-hand corner. This was our demonstration and test. What it doesn't show you is that within a half an hour, that salt water that was on the paver right next to the treated one had actually soaked into the bottom half an inch. And so what we find there is on pavers that are left untreated, over time, let's say 15 or 20 years down the road, those pavers may still look good on the surface. And this is not every paver, this was just one particular instance. But if you take up those pavers and we need to maintain an area, maybe we have settling, many times, not all the time, many times we'll find that those pavers are starting to break down in that bottom half inch. That's where that salt water, those chemicals are settling into those pavers. It's not on the surface so much, it's on the bottom of it. So by treating your pavers, by sealing them, not only can we help control efflorescence, because how does efflorescence form on a paver? Water absorbs in, it reacts with the unreacted lime or cement in the mix, creates a calcium hydroxide, I believe. When it comes to the surface, the water evaporates, that recrystallizes on the surface, forming efflorescence. So if we can control the direction of the water, we can control the direction of where that efflorescence will present itself. We're never trying to prevent it, but we can control it. And by using a sealer, that's exactly what we can do. I appreciate you guys taking the time today. It was very valuable for me that you spent as much time as you did. And if you have any questions, I'll be here for as long as you need. I believe you have some, Hedberg has a lunch over here, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
Good. Thank you guys very much for your time.